Javi,
Hey guys, how are you?
pretty good, pretty good. For those who don't know, I have known Javi Cardenas for, I mean, how long now? Over a decade?
Oh man, I was actually looking into that. Yeah, close to it, I think.
So
Sheesh.
Javi runs birdsup.com. I used to run birdsup.com. Gave it to Javi, sweat equity. You know, he was a good soldier. And he's made the site, I'm not just saying this because he's on the line, he's made the site way better than it ever was when, when I ran it. So go subscribe to birdsup.com. It's part of the Rivals Network, and they do a tremendous job covering UTSA football and recruiting. Javi, thanks for joining us today.
Of course, guys. Thanks for having me.
You know, I wanted to ask you before we get into like the football stuff. Somebody who went to UTSA, who's kind of been around, you know, since this program started, you know, a decade plus ago now. How different is the energy and just the excitement and optimism around Roadrunner football compared to maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago?
I mean, it's really a world of difference. I mean, I think the fans have always been excited ever since the football program started, as you know, and that excitement was always there. And then it kind of trailed off a little bit, right, as they struggled a little bit. But now these last couple of years, man, it's really eye opening around the city. Obviously, around campus when you head down there. Everyone's excited. Everybody's wearing the Roadrunner gear around town. They've really embraced the team. Jeff Traylor has really, harped on the whole, your town, your team kind of mentality, and the city has kind of backed them up on that. It was pretty amazing, last year as the season got going. Attendance was kind of, a little average, but you saw it incrementally go up as they kept winning games, right? And they kept winning and they kept winning, and then by the end of the championship game, you saw 40,000 plus at the Alamo Dome, which is something you haven't seen since the Coker years, right, when the team was first started. So it's really been incredible to see.
Yeah, I mean, when I was on campus, you know, I'm older than Javi, and we didn't have football yet. You know, we had the UTSA still undefeated in football shirts going around back then. But when you would go to class, you were more likely to see somebody in a Texas Longhorn shirt or a Texas A&M Aggie shirt or Texas Tech, you know, like whatever they grew up rooting for. And going around campus now when I'm there to cover practice or go talk to Coach Traylor, it really is amazing to see the school spirit and how much that's grown. I think it shows why UTSA wanted to start a football program. Lynn Hickey, the former athletic director, used to always talk about football as like the neon sign outside of a business. You know, it gets you in there, it gets you paying attention. And so, you know, my next question is that success that's starting to happen over the last 2 years, can you feel it on the recruiting trail and in a perception not only around campus and in the city, but from high school prospects and from players across the state who, you know, Coach Traylor's trying to get to UTSA?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think definitely you've seen a difference in the way they're recruiting. It's a different level of athlete that they've been recruiting, and we actually made a comment to a couple of my friends that follow the program that the recruits that that usually in the summer they start posting their workout pictures, right, of them around campus, and we made a comment like, hey man, like these guys didn't used to look like this when we were covering the program, gosh, like 5-6 years ago. And that's really the difference between a 2-star or a 3-star recruit, or when they first started the program, it was guys that didn't really have a lot of scholarship offers. Well, now it's guys that have Power 5 offers that could have chosen to go to bigger programs, and you see them hitting campus, and you see the difference physically, right? Which we could argue is the big difference between a 2-star or a 3-star prospect is just the how imposing they look when they hit campus. So yeah, it's been a world difference, with the new facilities. Obviously, winning always helps, but with the new facilities, it's just been a world of difference how they're recruiting. Right now, they have the #1 class in Conference USA. They're off to a great start there, and I don't see why that wouldn't continue as they go into the American. Obviously, they're going to need a higher level of talent to compete there, and I think they've done a great job of kind of being in that direction, to competing with the SMUs and the Memphis of the conference.
I think it really dawned on me when UTEP and UTSA played last year in UTEP. I had spent the 2 or 3 previous days up there doing UTEP stuff, and then when UTSA got in town, Coach Traylor kind of let me come to the hotel the morning of the game and do a story on, how you prep for a road game. And after being around the UTEP players and then going around the UTSA players, there was like a noticeable difference of like the size and strength of those guys. And then we saw that on the field. So, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like the program doesn't look the same anymore, right? We used to look at guys and, they were FCS type players who were playing a little bit up, and now they're bona fide FBS dudes who are all around. Speaking of a few of those guys, I think the big question mark for UTSA this year is going to be how they replace Sincere McCormick. As somebody who's around the program, who knows who they brought in, who they still have there, kind of how do you see UTSA replacing that production? Because it's clearly not going to be just one guy, obviously. But how do they go about kind of remaining a run-first team that really threatens teams that way?
Yeah, and Jeff Traylor has always said that they're going to be a run-based offense, right? They're going to be multiple, they're going to spread it out a little bit, but at the end of the day, they're still going to be, heavy on the run. Losing Sincere is obviously a big loss, but I think they've done a good job in replacing, at least attempting to replace his production, bringing in, a JUCO All-American and Ty Edwards, and then the Arkansas TCU transfer, Treylon Smith as well. I think he's probably the biggest addition of the summer. He just gives you another safety blanket there, right? And then you also have Brendan Brady, who decided to come back for his, I guess we can call it his super senior year. So, you're replacing McCormick with three very capable guys. I'm sure it's still going to be tough. I'm sure it's not going to be the same, right? Because they're three different styles of running backs. Sincere obviously works the workhorse, right? It's a guy that I remember against Memphis, they gave him the ball 36, 40 times, and he got those yards, and he was able to be trusted. Now it's going to be a little bit different, right? There's going to be 2 to 3 guys that you're going to have to lean on for that production. So can they do that is really the biggest question mark. Luckily for them, they have an experienced offensive line. Obviously, Frank Harris comes back, a guy that can extend his plays with his feet, right? So that's always a good safety blanket to have. And then obviously you have the receiving corps that are some of the best in the conference, maybe even the country, right? With Franklin, Cephas, and Clark. So the weapons are there, right? But obviously they are missing the biggest piece. Can they at least try to duplicate that? Is the biggest question mark for that offense.
Yeah, it leads me perfectly into my next question. I mean, I think I could make an argument that UTSA has the best trio of receivers at the G5 level. Do you think we see Frank Harris become a 30-plus attempt a game guy just because of how much they trust him? Will Stein, a former quarterback, kind of moving into the OC role, Sincere not being there, and then those receivers that we mentioned, would it be beneficial for this team to throw the ball a little bit more than maybe Joey McGuire's used to throwing it, just to kind of utilize the talent that they have on campus?
I think they're going to have to. With Sincere gone, there's going to be an adjustment period. They're not going to be able to hand it off as much as they did in the last couple of years. So they're against Houston, against Texas, against Army, those early games, they're going to have to throw the ball out until they can really get a sense of what their running game looks like. And I mean, it's been mentioned a couple of times that, their record is probably not going to duplicate what it was last year, right? Everything kind of lined up perfectly for them last year. So I think there's going to be some bumps and bruises with the offense, obviously, trying to figure it out. But I think they're going to have to rely heavily on Harris and their receivers to get them through that awkward phase as they figure it out as they head into conference play.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could make an argument that UTSA could be a better football team this year and have a much worse record just because of how hard the schedule is this year compared to last year. We talk a lot about the offense because it's kind of the sexy position, and Sincere McCormick was so good as a 2-time conference all conference USA, player on offense. But for me, when I look at UTSA, I think my main questions are on defense. What do you see about that defense? What do you think that they're going to be this year compared to maybe in the years past?
I agree 100%. I mean, everybody likes to talk about the offense, right? Because it's really what a lot of people focus on. But it's the defense that UTSA has a little bit more questions on. The defensive line, they lost some talent. They lost some talent in the secondary with Tyreek Woolen. So it's going to be a little different. It's how do they replace some of those veteran guys, those super senior guys that they've kind of leaned on, right? A guy like Jalen Haynes, a guy like a Dantzler, right? Guys that have been with the program for quite a bit and won a lot of games. So it's going to be interesting to see how the defensive line shaken up. Some of those younger guys that had been sitting in the wings, it's time for them to step up a little bit, right? So how does that work? At linebacker, you see guys like Ligon, right? Can he take the leadership role? Can Trevor Hermanson, come back for a super senior year and provide that leadership? Can Wisdom continue to be that leader in the defense? They brought in Sal Frazier, a 4-star JUCO corner, Nick Fortune, that a transfer from West Virginia to kind of shore up the cornerback spot. So there's a lot of unknowns. It's a lot of talent, obviously, but guys that we don't know much about. So how is that going to translate, right? It's like, again, it goes into that adjustment period and the beginning of the season, and it might not be, as smooth as it was last year because there's just that familiarity. Maybe by the time conference play, they'll finally reach, where they want to be, but it's definitely the beginning of the year is going to be interesting just to see how these guys kind of step into their new roles.
Yeah, I honestly think it almost is beneficial that Jeff Traylor was a high school coach because he needs to treat this year like non-district and district, where it's like that out-of-conference schedule, like, yeah, it'll be fun to win a few games, but it really doesn't matter. We just need to be who we need to be by conference play. Before I let you go, just to put you on the spot, UTSA starts with Houston, Texas, and Army. What do you think their record is after those 3 games?
Oh, man. The optimist in me says 1-3. But at least get one win out of those 3. But there's a good chance that it could be winless there, and like you said, it might not be reflective of how good this team is, and just kind of reflective of how good that out of conference schedule is. But if I had to say right now, I think they get 1 game out of those 3. I'm not going to say which one, but I think they get at least one of those 3. And
then if I set the over and under at 9, you going over or under in terms of just total wins on the year?
Oh, man. I'm going to go with under. Or you know what? I'll go with the push. Well,
that's why I said it at 9.
Yeah. I want to. Can you set it at 8.5? Now, I'll go with 8. I think 8 seems like a good number. It's not going to be as good as last year, like we mentioned. I think 8's a good solid number for this team. It's a number that gets you to the conference championship game, I think, at the end of the year. And it's something that, fans should be happy with when it's all said and done.
All righty, sir. I appreciate the time as always, and I will be there for Houston UTSA. I've already told Kyle Stevens at UTSA that I need my spot reserved, so look forward to week 1.
All right, man. See you there.
Later. That was Javi Cardenas from birdsup.com. Please go subscribe. I think I still get royalties.
You have to.
I know for a fact.
You should.
I know for a fact I still pay for the GoDaddy renewal. That's one of the best things about having me as a friend is I'm lazy, right? So like if it's just like about an auto renewal going through on my card or me calling you to figure that out, I'm just gonna.
You're just gonna let it go. You're just gonna let it go. Hear that, everybody?
Javi's been running birdsup.com for free for years now. So
yeah, that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, he was great. He was a college student when I took over, like when I made that site, and he started as like the baseball writer. And I think he would even admit I would have to go back and like edit all of this stuff,
right?
Like go, and he's like grown into a really good writer. And I really do think that site is leaps and bounds better than it was when I was running it. I was not made to be a message board guy.
Yeah,
I'm a journalist. I write a story, I put it out there, and then I want to move on to the next thing. I don't want to have a conversation for 24 hours about anything, honestly.
You'd rather write about it on paper rather than just having a little message board conversation or even with somebody in person.
And you got to deal with the customers and all that kind of stuff.
You don't want
it's like a business, and I just don't have the personality to that. So if you're a UTSA fan or you're somebody who's like getting into UTSA football, starting really paying attention in the city, I cannot recommend birdsup.com enough, not only for the information, but just from the community. They put on tailgates and all that kind of stuff. So it's a fun thing to get to.
For sure.
All righty, let's finish up this with a few UTSA questions.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and ask one of the obvious ones first. Who do you think the bigger loss is, running back Sincere McCormick or linebacker Clarence Hicks?
I think I'm going to surprise people. I think it's Clarence Hicks for the reasons that Javi and I were kind of talking about, right? Like,
for sure.
I'm a believer that your run game has as much to do, if not more to do, with your offensive line than your running back. Sincere McCormick behind a bad offensive line is not as good as a average running back behind a really good offensive line. Like, give me average running back, awesome offensive line over a great running back, average offensive line. So I think the running game is going to be fine. Frank Harris can run. That passing game is going to be really, really good. So I think offensive-wise, it's going to be fine.
Right.
What they're missing, though, is that pass rush. And Clarence Hicks, with 10.5 sacks last year, set a record. Probably should have been the Conference USA Defensive Player of the Year. I think they just didn't want to give everything to UTSA, and so he didn't get that one. But I think they don't have a for sure fire like that dude's coming off the edge, and that's what Clarence Hicks provided UTSA. I think finding that pass rush threat is going to be the biggest question mark for the Roadrunners going into the season.
Well, and you heard Javi too. He said that Jeff Traylor's always going to be in that run-based offense mindset, so they're always going to have those backup running backs, those backup tight ends that can fulfill that running game pretty easily. But you're not always going to have those defensive guys, those linebackers that can take a place of Clarence Hicks.
You can scheme your running game.
Yes.
Right? You can come up with interesting and creative ways for your running games to work. On defense, it's more about just being a dude. Right? You can either get to the quarterback or you can't. And Clarence Hicks in 2020 couldn't. He had a lot of pressures, but he didn't get a single sack.
Right.
And over that offseason, he became a pass rushing specialist that could finish, at the quarterback. And maybe UTSA has a guy or two that's making that exact same transition right now behind the scenes, but we haven't seen it yet until the Roadrunners can prove like, hey, this guy can get after the passer. I think Clarence Hicks is the biggest loss from that team last year.
For sure. Let's go with, is UTSA the favorite to win Conference USA? They won the regular season and they won the Conference USA championship last year. So are they the favorites to repeat? Maybe just regular season, maybe championship game. What are your thoughts?
I think like Javi, it's getting out of that out of conference schedule unscathed, right? Like I don't care so much about the record. I want to know about the health.
Right.
Like does UTSA get out of those 3 games as the same Roadrunner team that we're looking at on paper? Because if they are healthy and Frank Harris is healthy, those wide receivers are healthy, and the defense comes around, on paper, the only team that could compete with them for conference championship is UAB.
Yep.
Western Kentucky's going to take a step back this year with Bailey Zappi, Jarrett Stearns being gone. So I see this as a 2-team race between UAB and UTSA, that UAB has the better defense, UTSA has the better offense, at least going into the season, and we'll see which one kind of matters more or which of those other units steps up. Does the UAB offense really step up? Does the UTSA defense really step up? I think we see those 2 teams play in the conference championship game.
Do you think this season for them could be a little bit more of a mind game? Because like we mentioned with Javi, their first 3 games, you've got Houston, Army, and Texas. What if they go 0-3? Then you get Texas Southern, which is probably a win. But what if you go? It better be, yes. So what if you go into conference play? Would be 1-3 at that point.
I think that's a great way to put it. I do think it's mental because last year they started 11-0.
Yep.
And everybody in the city, everybody on campus, all their family, all their friends, right? Patting them on the back, telling them how great they are. They were the best football team in UTSA history. I know that's not a long history, so take that with a grain of salt. But everybody's telling you are the best to ever play here. Like, y'all are great. You win a conference championship. You get ranked, all of that kind of stuff. That same group of guys, or at least pretty close to that same group of guys, may be looking at 0-3 this year. And you're not going to get as much praise, right? Your friends, your parents, your girlfriends, they're not your social media. There's going to be some negativity.
You're going to have to step up in other ways.
How do you handle that?
Right.
How do you handle that? And so I think that's why Jeff Traylor's adopted this bull don't care saying. For those who don't know, Jeff Traylor-isms are, they're like Ted Lasso, right? Like he's just a guy who can like come up with a phrase. And the one for this year is bull don't care, because the bull doesn't care if you're the rodeo champion or if you're the worst bull rider of all time. He just wants you off his back.
Yep.
Right. And that's what UTSA is going to have to deal with this year, is being this program that now has expectations, having an out-of-conference schedule that's going to be really hard. How do those 2 things meld, and how do you stick together? And I think that's why Traylor has to rely on his high school roots and think of it as non-district and district.
Yep.
And we've seen teams go and win state championships with 0-4, 0-5 district records, right? It does not matter. It all gets thrown out. UTSA isn't playing for a college football playoff spot. Okay, the record does not matter. What matters is your conference. And if they go 0-3 to start the year but win Conference USA, that's a better season than if they go 1-2, 2-1, and then don't win Conference USA.
Right.
So this is all about the conference this year, all about winning Conference USA, and all about setting yourself up to move to the American.
And let's close it out with that. Speaking of, what can UTSA be in the American Athletic Conference? And I think the first game of the season is going to be a big indicator of how they're going to be able to compete with. And even though Houston will be moving to the Big 12, that's still a Conference USA
versus
American setup right then.
Yeah, I think it's a good litmus test for UTSA to kind of see what the differences are.
Can they hang with the top of
Not only just
American.
the players, but the coaching staff, right? To really like see up close, okay, here's where we're at, here's where we need to be. I think UTSA had really risen to the top of Conference USA in terms of spending. Right? Traylor gets that $2.8 million 10-year extension. The facilities, as Javi mentioned, are incredible now. Like when I was covering UTSA, they were doing everything out of like a portable trailer.
Right.
Like that, you drove off campus to go do like an interview or whatever. Like now it's all there at the race facility. They're going to have to step it up even more for the American. Right?
Yep,
They're about mid-table spending wise at the American. It's hard to expect money wins.
Yep.
In college football.
Right.
It just does. And so until they kind of get to the top of spending in the American, I see them as a middle of the table team. Coaching is going to be a big deal. You know, I think Jeff Traylor is a tremendous coach, so that kind of helps. But it's going to be an adjustment period. I don't expect them to walk into the American and just dominate the way that they are currently in Conference USA. It's going to be an adjustment specifically after they lose this group of players. When Frank Harris is gone, when Sakari Franklin's gone, when Rashad Wisdom is gone, who steps up and becomes the UTSA football program after that in the American? We're going to have to find that out, and that's going to be, to me, the most fascinating thing to watch UTSA over the next couple of years is who are those next leaders? Because Frank Wilson, who got fired rightfully, doesn't get the credit he deserves for getting these guys on campus. Like all the guys we're mentioning were there when Jeff Traylor got there, right? So we're going to have to see Jeff Traylor win with his own players in the American. That's going to be as much of an adjustment as moving up.